Guys, I got cooked. Absolutely raised shit in the comments by pro-choicers, or at least they think I did. So a little while ago, I had posted a short video trying to point out what I believe is an inconsistency within the abortion debate. In the reel, I had said, kill a pregnant woman and face 2 murder charges, but if the mother chooses to kill the baby herself, it's healthcare. And let's just say that people had a lot to say about that. Now, to be fair, some of those comments were just sarcasm, some were insults, emotional, but some actually tried to respond to the argument, or at least to the post. So today we're going to go through some of those common pro-choice comments and that I got and see whether they actually cooked me or if they completely missed the point of the video. But before we jump into the comments, hello everyone, my name is Rafael. I'm the host of the Small Town Bible Questions YouTube channel where I help answer your Bible questions and anything related to Christianity. If you're new here to the channel, I would love it if you would like this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and as always, don't forget to hit that bell notification icon. That way you don't miss any of the upcoming videos, and not only that, but it also helps me with the whole YouTube algorithm, and it helps other people find this kind of content. So if you've done that, thank you very much. If not, do that. Now, let's get back into this video and these comments. Now, by far, some of the biggest responses that I got was some version of this idea right here. It's almost like the woman gets to choose. Imagine that. It's the mother's decision, not yours, not mine. The reason that it is the way it is because you are taking away that mother's choice. Because the murder wasn't her choice. She wanted the baby. Abortion is okay because she didn't want the baby. Her body, her choice. If you forcibly take money from someone, it is robbery. But if they give it willingly, it's fine. Now, these comments are all basically trying to say the exact same thing, that the difference between abortion and murder is consent or choice. In other words, if someone else ends the life of the unborn child against the mother's will, it's wrong. But if the mother chooses it, then suddenly it becomes acceptable. But here's the issue that I was trying to point out with my original video. It's that choice by itself doesn't actually answer the moral question. It just pushes the question back one step because we still have to ask, what exactly is the unborn? Think about it this way. If the unborn child isn't a human life with value, then why is killing that same unborn child during the attack on a pregnant woman treated as such a serious offense in the first place? Why do people instinctively recognize that there were 2 victims involved? But again, if the unborn child is a human life, then simply saying, well, the mother chose it doesn't automatically solve the moral issue either. Because choice alone cannot be the thing that determines whether killing another human being is morally acceptable. For example, imagine if a mother said, I don't want my newborn baby anymore. Therefore, I should be able to allow it to end its life. Almost everybody, and I think including most pro-choicers, they would immediately recognize that that was wrong. But again, why? Because deep down, we understand that whether somebody is wanted or unwanted, it doesn't determine whether they have value. Now, at this point, somebody will probably respond with, yeah, but the difference is that the baby has been born. But that response raises another question. Why does passing through the birth canal suddenly change the child's moral value? Because before birth and after birth, it's still the same human organism. The baby didn't magically become human 5 seconds later. It didn't suddenly become alive during delivery. So if somebody argues that the unborn has no value before birth, but full value immediately after birth, then they still have no explanation as far as what meaningful change happened that suddenly transformed the child from something disposable into something with rights. And I think this is why a lot of those comments actually miss the point of the original video. My argument was never simply about whether something is legal or illegal. My point was about consistency, because if the unborn child has no human value, then why do we treat the destruction of that unborn child during violence against a pregnant woman as such a tragedy? But if the unborn child doesn't have any value, then saying the mother chooses it by itself doesn't really settle the moral question. Now, another huge category of comments that I got was basically people saying, well, yeah, abortion and murder are different. For example, yep, it's good you understand. That's right. Yes, healthcare and reducing unwanted babies. Bro discovered there's a difference between abortion and murder. This just proves that there's a difference between murder and abortion. This isn't the flex that you think it is. Legal versus legal. Very simple to understand. Now, at first, these comments sound like they're answering the argument, but if you really think about it, they're mostly just restating the disagreement, because my original video was never claiming that abortion and murder are currently treated the same way legally. Obviously, they aren't. Everybody already knows that. The entire point of the video was asking why they're treated differently. In other words, these comments are basically responding with, well, abortion isn't murder because abortion isn't murder. But again, that doesn't actually explain the reasoning behind it. Imagine if somebody in the past said, why is this group of human being treated differently under the law? And somebody responded, because the law treats them differently. Well, okay, but that still doesn't answer whether the distinction itself is morally justified. Laws obviously can be right, but the laws can also be wrong. So something being legal automatically doesn't make it moral. There were a lot of things that throughout history that were completely legal and they were still deeply immoral, like slavery. So when people respond with abortion is legal or it's healthcare, they're not really addressing the actual question being asked. The real debate is, what is the unborn? Because if the unborn child is just a tissue with no moral values, then yeah, of course, abortion would make sense. But if the unborn child is a human being, then legality alone doesn't settle the issue any more than legality settles any other moral debate. And this is why I made the comparison in the first place. So if our laws already recognize that there's value in the unborn child when someone else takes its life, then the real question becomes, what changes about that child itself when the mother is the one choosing it? Now, another really common response that I got was basically some version of the unborn isn't actually alive yet, or it's just a clump of cells still developing. For example, most abortions are performed before the baby is medically considered alive, when it's still in development. Now, this other person said a lot of things in this comment, and there's honestly multiple conversations wrapped up in it, but one of the main points that they brought up was the idea that the difference comes down to gestation and development. Now, this is where the conversation usually shifts away from choice and into actual nature of the unborn child itself. Because notice, even a lot of pro-choice people understand that if the unborn child is a human being with the same moral value as a born child, then abortion becomes much harder to justify. So the argument becomes, well, it's not really alive yet, or it's still developing. But here's the problem with that reasoning. Scientifically speaking, the unborn child is already alive. It's not biologically dead tissue magically becoming alive later on. From the moment of conception, you already have a distinct living human organism with its own DNA, its own development, and its own continuous growth process. In fact, all of us are still developing right now. Toddlers are developing, teenagers are developing, even adults continue developing and changing throughout life. So being under development cannot be the thing that determines whether someone has value, because development is a continuous process that every human being is going through. This is where I think the conversation gets really important. A lot of people say things like, well, it's just a clump of cells, but technically, so are you. Every human being is made of cells. The real question is not whether the unborn is made of cells. The question is, what kind of organism are those cells forming? And the answer biologically is a human organism. Now, usually at this point, someone will say, okay, but it's not conscious yet, or it's not self-aware yet. But that creates a bigger problem, because newborn babies are far less self-aware than many adult animals. People in comas or temporarily lose consciousness. Sleeping people are not actively self-aware, but we still recognize that those human beings as having value, because we understand that human worth is not based on the current level of function or ability. Because once human value becomes dependent on abilities like self-awareness, consciousness, or level of function, the people with the fewest abilities inevitably end up with the least protection. And I don't think most people truly want to build human values on a scale like that. But again, if you want a deeper breakdown of those personhood arguments specifically, I've made separate videos responding to philosophers like Peter Singer, Marianne Warren, and Michael Tooley. So feel free to watch those. I'll leave a link in the description, and I'll also leave one of those little cards here that you can click on that. But yeah, go check out those arguments on personhood if you haven't already. Now, there was also another interesting comment where a person was trying to compare abortion to things like life support or parents making medical decisions for their children. For example, this person said, pull a child's plug in the hospital and it's murder. But a parent signs a paper to pull the plug, It's healthcare. It's called consent. Parents legally have rights to give consent for their child. Now, this argument's a little bit more thoughtful than some of the others because it's trying to argue that parents already make life and death medical decisions for their children all the time. But there's a major difference between removing extraordinary medical interventions from someone who is naturally dying and intentionally ending the life of someone whose body is functioning exactly as it's supposed to. For example, if someone is brain dead and machines are artificially keeping their organs functioning, then families may choose to stop extraordinary treatment to allow that person to die naturally. But abortion is different from that because pregnancy itself is not artificial life support. The unborn child is not a corpse being mechanically sustained. The child is a living human organism actively developing according to its natural biological process. So, like in other words, abortion is not usually about refusing extraordinary treatment. It's about intentionally interrupting and ending an already ongoing human life process. And I think that this comment accidentally reveals something important too. Notice that even in this example, people still recognize that the unborn child is a real human subject that decisions are being made about. The disagreement isn't really about whether something biologically human exists. The disagreement really is about whether one person should have authority to intentionally end that human life. And again, that brings us back to the central question again of what makes a human life valuable. Is human value something intrinsic to being human, or is human value something granted by other people based on wantedness, independence, consciousness, or convenience? Because how you answer that question really changes everything. Now, probably the most emotionally charged comment that I got, and you typically get, usually from people who are basically accusing me or other abolitionists or pro-choicers of just wanting power or control over women. For example, this person said, "Good thing we will never take advice from a man telling us what to do with our bodies. You forced birthers just want control of women. It's never been about the fetus. Effing clowns." This other person said, "In the states that want to provide free condoms which reduce abortions, you guys don't support. It's about control." Now, I want to be fair here because I do think that there are people who approach this topic in an unhelpful or overly political way, but I also think that reducing the entire abolitionist or pro-life position down to you just want control completely misses what most abolitionists actually believe, because for most abolitionists, the central issue has never been how do we control women? The central issue has always been what is the unborn? Because if the unborn child is just simply tissues with no human value, then again, abortion would make sense. But again, if the unborn child is a human being, then protecting that life is not about control any more than laws against harming other born humans are about control. Again, every law restricts somebody's choice in some way. For example, laws against theft restrict choices, laws against assault restrict choices, laws against abuse restrict choices. The question is never simply whether choice is being limited. The real question is whether there's a morally sufficient reason for limiting that choice. And abolitionists believe that there is, because we believe another human life is involved. Now, as far as the contraception argument specifically, I think that there needs to be some nuance here. First, not every abolitionist or pro-life agrees on contraceptive. Most are completely fine with certain forms of contraceptive, so long as those contraceptives don't end the life of an already conceived human being. So this is not as simple as abolitionists oppose condoms because they want control. A lot of disagreement actually comes back to the deeper question about when human life begins and what protections that life deserves. But even beyond that, preventing pregnancy and justifying abortion are still two different conversations. Someone can support reducing unwanted pregnancies and still believe that intentionally ending an unborn human life is morally wrong. Because again, the central issue for abolitionists is not ultimately about controlling women, it's about whether the unborn child is a human being worthy of protection. Now, that's the end of today's video. So what did you guys think? Did I actually get cooked by these pro-choice comments, or did a lot of people just simply miss the point that I was trying to make? Let me know down in the comments what you think. And as always, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and don't forget to hit that bell notification icon. That way you don't miss any of the future videos and maybe another series of different pro-choice comments that I get. Till next time, God bless.